The Alps, millions of years old, are in motion. In 2017, a flank of Piz Cengalo in Switzerland broke off.
In recent years, especially in the Mont Blanc area and others under surveillance, we've seen a significant increase in rockfalls at certain altitudes.
Boulders on the highway destroyed houses. Is the living environment in the Alps in danger?
There should only be settlement development where such dangers do not exist.
The experts are very concerned because the climate is changing.
There will be a change in the landscape. The glaciers will continue to retreat.
It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning. The area near Interlaken in Switzerland will be cordoned off on a large scale. Last briefing of the task force, the men pack up the explosives and fuses and climb up the mountain. They want to demolish a crumbling rock face above the district road. The rockfall is a threat to the residents.
The unstable rock mass has a volume of 80 to 100 cubic meters. If this breaks off, it would break up into individual pieces, which would fall on the district road that leads down to the lake. It's very dangerous, and people could get hurt there.
For the explosives experts, this is routine work. They lay the fuses and press the explosives into the 80-centimeter deep holes. There is air support too. A helicopter brings protective mats that are used to cover the explosion site and prevent the stones from being dispersed in this terrain. It's a big effort. Additional protective palisades secure the area to the right and left of the explosion site. Finally, the controlled detonation.
3, 2, 1.
It was a success.
At first glance, it looks very good. The unstable mass is down, but it's unclear what it looks like further up. It doesn't look bad from down here.
The men removed the last loose boulders in the rock face. It won't be their last mission.
Safety detonations are being carried out more frequently now, sometimes on a grand scale or on a small scale, depending on the location.
Here, the danger has been averted, but rockfalls are a threat everywhere in the Alps, and the problem is getting worse. On August the 23rd, 2017, at about 7 p.m., a huge rock face at the northern flank of Piz Cengalo in the Swiss canton of Grison broke off. Eyewitnesses are recording the disaster with their cell phones. The small village of Bondo was particularly affected. There was a lot of damage and 8 people died. Are rockfall disasters on the increase? What can be done to meet this threat? Professor Michael Krautblatter from the Technical University of Munich has been observing the developments in the Alps for years.
At altitudes of around 3,000 meters, which is just where the permafrost thaws, we see an increase in rockfalls. It becomes quite apparent in the Mont Blanc region in Switzerland, for example. This may be a vision of the future. A very sensitive area is thawing right now, and this will spread all over the Alps.
The slopes in the high mountains start to slide because the permafrost, which covers the mountains like a suit of armor, thaws. But there are other reasons too. In January 2018, roads were closed and a danger zone was declared in the Austrian village of Pfalz in Innsbrucker Land. Nothing was the same as it was before the great landslide on Christmas Eve 2017. 120,000 cubic meters of rock thundered down right between two settlements. The road was buried under several meters of gravel, rock and soil. A few minutes before the accident, the residents still drove to Christmas Mass on that road. It was considered a Christmas miracle that nobody was injured and no houses were destroyed. But 150 inhabitants were cut off from the outside world for days. The Jörglerhof of Rudolf Gatt and his family, located along the buried country road, was just about spared.
It was a noise as if a snowplow would pass, followed by a huge cloud of dust. When we turned the outside lights on, we saw nothing but rocks. It was a disaster.
Eine Katastrophe für uns.
Miraculously, he and his family were unharmed.
Everybody was inside the house. 10 minutes before, our children and daughter-in-law had come home. If someone was buried under this, you'd never find them.
Their most precious meadow, 2.5 hectares in size, is now covered with several meters of gravel and soil.
We also suffered big losses in regards to our farm holiday rentals, but we have to take it the way it is. Nature is nature. You can't fight it.
Josef Gatt also has the hillside of this misfortune right in front of his eyes. The farmer and his family witnessed the landslide on Christmas Eve.
It was about 6:30 in the evening. We were in the kitchen. It was like an earthquake. When we went out onto the balcony, we saw the whole mountain coming down in the direction of the house. Because of the dust, we went inside again, closed the door and waited for what would happen.
After the rockfall, the authorities resorted to unusual protective measures. They installed anti-tank barriers. Soldiers of the Austrian armed forces lined up the steel monsters directly under the affected slope as a temporary protection. At temperatures of -12 degrees Celsius, the soldiers placed a total of 160 of these barriers in the snow. The steel barriers are now standing in 2 rows in front of a small farmhouse. Farmer Franz Kreidel was evacuated as well. For weeks he was only allowed to go to his farm briefly in the mornings and evenings. He has been living in Pfalz for 60 years, and there were always rockfalls, but not to this extent.
If you follow the news, you notice that natural disasters like this happen more frequently. One day the rock simply crumbles.
When will the mountain in Pfalz come to rest? There is still no all clear after the dramatic rockfall. Control flights via helicopter show freshly torn crevices above the enormous tear-off edge. Rocks may tumble at any time. Geologist Michael Mölk keeps his eye on the devastating landslide of Pfalz. He is responsible for mountain safety throughout the country on behalf of the Austrian Federal Ministry in Innsbruck. To better assess the danger in Pfalz, Mölk designed a 3D model, which allows him to initiate the right countermeasures in further crisis situations.
This red-marked area represents a relatively small rockslide scenario with about 10,000 cubic metres. It can be absorbed well with the protective dam that we're building here. If the blue scenario should occur, which is much larger and less likely to happen, we will need to take other precautions here to provide appropriate protection.
Walz, 10 weeks after the rockslide. Heavy-duty excavators are clearing the buried road. The scree will form a 3-metre-high protective dam. Villagers like Farmer Kreidel try to return to their everyday lives. The anti-tank barriers in front of his yard remain in place for the time being, just in case. Together with his team, Michael Möll collects data on rockfalls and landslides. He knows that for centuries, people in the Alpine region have learned to live with the dangers. Technical progress made it possible to push the settlements further and further into nature, into the red areas, into the danger zones.
In the settlement areas in the valleys, the sensitivity of the people has increased. Today, we also use areas for settlements which used to be agricultural ground, where stones that were located there were handled in a completely different way. They cleared the area and continued with their work.
What does this mean for the people in endangered areas? Do people need to rethink their settlement plans? The Swiss Alps in the Canton of Valais. The view on these 4,000-metre peaks is magnificent. The Morsfluh mountain station is situated at an altitude of 2,334 meters. This is the workplace of Peter Schwitter. The 55-year-old works as a mountain observer for the canton. For 18 years, he has been responsible for the safety in the region. On this day, Peter Schwitter and his crew are establishing new paths for mountain hikers. Every step of the fenced-in paths could be dangerous. There are deep cracks and crevices lurking all over the mountain.
The dangerous thing about the cracks here is that some of them are still overgrown with grass and can be very deep, because underneath the rock is split. A rescue from such crevasses would be quite complicated and very laborious.
But these are only minor problems at the Morsfluh. The bigger ones can be seen a few meters away, wide gaps and shifts in the earth.
They're about 1 meter wide.
The gaps show an enormous change in nature.
Here you can see a slumping. It's as if you turn a book upside down and the pages slowly open sideways, which results in a tilting movement to the side.
The hill now slopes 65 meters towards the valley. The cracks and crevices in the mountain get deeper and deeper. More and more rocks become loose. It's a result of climate change. The Aletsch at the foot of the Morsfluh, the biggest glacier in the Alps, recedes more and more. Peter Schwitter sees this development with great concern.
Behind me you can see the Aletsch glacier. If you look closely, you can see the bright line on the left side far above the current glacier position. It's the moraine from 1850, which means that in 1850 the glacier towered up to that point.
It's 23 kilometers long, up to 900 meters thick, and yet the glacier is doomed to die. The ice giant is shrinking by 23 meters each year. Its ice sheet recedes in its bed, losing height and mass. For centuries, the glacier has supported the mountain flanks. Now, this support is lost. It's almost impossible to stop this development.
If everything continues as it does at the moment, we expect that in about 50 to 60 years this glacier will have disappeared. The same goes for the glaciers on top of the mountains.
Peter Schwitter monitors the changes around the Aletsch with 5 GPS transmitters. Even the measuring station has now tilted by 7 degrees. Schwitter and his colleagues used the GPS data to assess the danger of falling rocks. The crevices on the Moosflue are getting deeper and deeper. An area of 2 square kilometers threatens to slide towards the glacier, an area the size of 250 football fields. It's a disastrous development.
The footpaths were partially destroyed. The area is no longer accessible to people, really. It's just too dangerous.
What consequences will the glacier melt have? When will the huge rockfall occur? The experts must learn more about these natural hazards. Mount Champsura at the Fluela Pass Road in the Swiss canton of Grison. Dr. Andrin Kavitzel from the Swiss Institute for Snow and Avalanche Research wants to simulate a rockfall for research purposes with the aid of several pink concrete blocks equipped with high-tech sensors.
This sensor measures accelerations of up to 4,000 degrees per second. That is 400 times the gravitational acceleration. And it also measures the air pressure so that we can estimate the jumping heights along with the video.
All this data is recorded by the sensor during the fall. The rockfall tests wouldn't be possible without the help of helicopters. Andrin Kavitzel and his colleague Sophia Demmel make their way up to the landing site. The first concrete block is roped up and floats into the Swiss sky. In the valley, at the pass road, the measuring team eagerly awaits the first rockfall. Everything is ready. High-resolution cameras are pointed at the test slope in different angles. This should allow to later calculate the fall track for a 3D simulation. At a height of 2,300 meters, the first stone is hoisted onto the researchers' tipping platform. It's a rather flat concrete block weighing 210 kilograms. The tension is growing. The explorers are waiting for the command from the valley. Finally, there's the countdown.
3, 2, 1, go.
The hammer falls for the beginning of the data recording. The slab is tilted by air pressure until the concrete block goes downhill.
Run, stop.
The team examines the worn concrete block and ropes it up again. This morning, the helicopter lifts the fallen stones back up into the air 11 times. The researchers work through their series of experiments quickly and thoroughly, with new fall tracks and different stone sizes and shapes, including the largest concrete block with almost 800 kilograms.
This 800-kilogram wheel achieved the longest distance on the right-hand side. We could see that it also rolled and jumped over this scree field without losing much of its momentum in the end. It may be a new record.
After the fall experiments are completed, Andrin Kavitzel and Sophia Demmel return to the valley. The exciting question is, did the measuring technology inside the stones work?
The error signal is on.
It shows an error. Is it possible that the sensor didn't record any data at all? Only the evaluation in the institute will show whether the costly test day at the Fluela Pass wasn't in vain. The scientists breathe a sigh of relief the next day at the Institute for Snow and Avalanche Research in Davos. Andrin Kavitzel can now evaluate the data for his 3D simulation program, RAM's Rockfall.
What we can see here is the reconstruction of yesterday's experiment of our staged rockfall. We start the same block at exactly the same starting point and simulate the possible fall tracks of these blocks.
With the 3D simulation program, the Swiss scientist wants to help improve the danger zone maps and thus the protection against rockfall in the Alps. The main questions are:
which places are particularly endangered? Where is it necessary to install protective measures? And how large must they be?
Michael Mölk is heading to a construction site in the community of Ötz, about an hour from Innsbruck. The geologist is in charge of mountain safety. He arrives at the construction site. Everything seems to be under control. Michael Mölk is satisfied with the preliminary result. The men have been working here for several weeks in their attempt to protect the settlement from dangerous rockfall. There are houses only a few meters from the steep slope that wouldn't stand a chance in case of a rockfall. A 5-meter-high special fence shall intercept the boulders weighing several tons. Its special feature is a spring construction that is anchored in the ground. The springs extend in case of a rockfall, softening the force of the impact.
This is a state-of-the-art 3,000 kilojoules rockfall fence. These intermediate ropes make sure that the forces that occur are better distributed over the entire surface.
Safety fences near settlements are becoming increasingly important. Some of the rockfalls have dramatic consequences. More and more often, the construction teams have to erect protective fences. The situation in Ötz has recently become increasingly critical. Michael Mölk climbs the mountain above the construction site. Here, the rocks become more and more brittle. Huge stone blocks threaten to slide off. Some of them are only held by trees. Mölk carefully registers every change in the slope and measures the location and size of the rocks. The new safety fence is precisely designed for the mightiest and heaviest of them.
We define this 2 cubic meter block here as our model. With the sort of rock we have here, this equates about 5.5 tons in weight. The net is able to sustain a collision with more than 20 meters per second, which is about 75 kilometers per hour.
The fence in the Ötztal is one of the most secure systems. Intermediate ropes ensure that the forces are better distributed in case of an impact. 1 single meter costs 1,500 euros. Such protective fences are the result of extensive tests. Manufacturers hurl blocks of stone of different sizes into their fences. The experiment works. The fence bulges and tames the danger. Finishing touches in Ötz. The men close the fence and screw the connections together. Once again, they secured a settlement in the Alpine region. Such fences aren't the only measure to protect residential areas from falling rocks. Bad Fallenbach in the Upper Bavarian district of Rosenheim. The geologists, Dr. Roland Eichhorn and Thomas Gallemann from the Bavarian Environmental Agency, are on their way to a test mission at a torrent gorge nearby the village. On the hillside there is a measuring station that monitors the Brechries, the slope on the opposite side. This major slide over the Jenbach stream consists of a clay-lime mixture and is always in motion and therefore very dangerous.
If this loose material would abruptly fall into the stream, the water from the stream would soak it, creating a mudslide that could rush to the village at an unimaginable speed. It could reach the village within 10 minutes. This muddy mass would hit the village with such force that whole houses would be undermined and therefore collapse. We have to take precautions against that.
8 million cubic meters of rock have moved at the Brecheries since 1980. Therefore, the geologists record the slightest changes in the mountain from the opposite side of the slope. The data from the laser tachymeter show that in 1 year the front edge of the Brecheries moved by 12 centimeters. Geologist Thomas Gallemann checks the changes in the measuring spots on the computer.
We have to assume that there will be more rockfalls, which is why it was so important to us that we just finished recording all geological danger zones in the Bavarian Alps. We've been documenting this on maps for the past 10 years.
The danger zone at the Jenbach isn't just monitored. To prevent the torrent from becoming a sudden danger to the inhabitants in the event of a rockfall, the authorities taint the stream with barriers and a huge buffer of rocks and concrete. This artificial basin is the last safety device in case of an emergency.
In case of such an event, the Jenbach will come from up there, taking stones and rocks with it. These rocks will cluster here, and if things are really tough, this debris will accumulate up to this uppermost concrete beam and then fall over this barrier.
The engineer's plan is for the massive iron rake to hold back the largest boulders.
This is really huge. How big is it? 8 or 7 meters, right?
We
want to prepare for this worst-case scenario as well as possible in order to reduce the residual risk for this location.
All these protective measures can reduce the risk, but they can't erase it. In Switzerland alone, the cost of damage caused by natural events adds up to 275 million euros per year. For the experts, the consequences of this development are clear.
In most cases, we cannot prevent a rockfall. We will try to respond to these events with changes in our settlement plans and no longer develop settlements in danger zones.
The Alps emerged millions of years ago. For centuries, this mighty line of peaks was considered steadfast. This myth is a thing of the past. The alpine habitat has become fragile. The Swiss Alps in the Canton of Valais. The view on these 4,000-meter peaks is magnificent.